There's a wisdom that keeps you. That wisdom was revealed in Jesus, right? And so whatever is behind anybody falling astray is that they've forgotten what it means that they were crucified with Christ, right? And they've been raised up with Christ.
Or not even forgotten, but not told.
No, forgotten in the sense of not knowing what that means.
Yes, right, exactly. Yes.
Or losing sight of it. For example, not really knowing what it means to have been crucified with Christ. I'm dead to the world and the world to me.
Yeah.
Do you know what that means? That means that my life is not contained in the world.
Right.
So when I want to know about my life, I don't look to the life I have in the world.
Yeah.
If I do look to the life I have in the world, then that's going to cause me to get caught up in whatever, right? But the message of how I was crucified with Christ, that's why it's always got to be front and center, because it tells you how that's not your life.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when this is trying to distract you by saying, look at your life, it's not so shiny. It's not so precious. It's looking pretty bad there. I don't know. What are we going to do about it? Now you're starting to be tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine.
Yes.
Because now you're starting to think, what can I do to fix that? And then you'll have every one of your friends under the sun come with their own idea about how you can fix it. And listen, they're well-meaning and well-intentioned. They love you. But it doesn't mean we take counsel from everybody.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
So the message of the cross tells you about how your life, you're dead to the life in the world. Though your life was once hid in the world, God got it right to remove your life from the world and to seat it in heavenly places at His right hand. He got it right. How do we know? Because Jesus is your life and He's seated in heavenly places at the right hand of God. Right? So when we get off, it's because of that. Right? Some thought of I lack.
Right.
Some thought of I don't have what is needed as it pertains to life and godliness. Listen, if a person was really persuaded that they had all things that pertain to life and God-likeness, you couldn't convince them they needed to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter if you stripped them down, shoved a crown of thorns on their heads, beat them senseless, and nailed them to a tree. You couldn't convince them they needed to do anything.
Right.
Right? And so the way we can be deceived is we can get our eyes set on the life we have in the world. That thing's subject to moth and rust, decay. And as it looks decayed, we can feel not nice about it because none of us want to have a decaying life.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start feeling compelled to think, where are we missing it? Where are we falling short? What do I not know? What do I need to do? Right? And then we start falling into that. So when you think that life is found in the world, or it's about perfecting your life in the world, it's easy to not see Jesus. It's easy to be led astray. It's easy to be deceived. It's easy to be tempted. But what happens as you really begin sitting underneath the teaching of I was crucified with Christ. I'm dead to the world and the world to me. I was raised up with Christ. My life is hid with God in Christ. As you begin being established in that, you no longer look on what happens in the world as if it pertains to your life.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so what happens to you in the world can't move you.
Right.
Now, you could feel sorrow and experience tribulation, but then God will come and give you joy for your sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Because He'll come and tell you about how He conquered that. And how He raised your life above all of that. And how that can't steal from your life. And you start feeling happy again. Right? But a big Jewish mindset, because they didn't understand the resurrection of the dead, they looked on the law as if it was all about how you're going to have a good life in this world.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they connected to it. Right? It wasn't about... The Jewish people never thought about going to heaven. That's a Gentile pagan concept, going to heaven. Right? The Jews were never busy with how are we going to go to heaven. That's not what they were ever busy thinking. Okay? And so what they were busy thinking was there's going to be some kind of resurrection of the dead. We don't really know what that looks like or what that means or anything about it. And so they didn't even have a concept of that, but they were busy thinking this law is going to help me to have a good life in this earth.
Yeah.
That's why it was so shocking to them when Jesus comes as the Son of God and has what is called a cursed life. That's why the parable of Lazarus and the rich man was such a profound shakeup for them. Because in the Jewish mind, the people who had were blessed. And they were blessed because they've been doing the law. The people who had not were not blessed. And they weren't blessed because they hadn't been doing the law. That's why the Pharisee in Luke 18 tells God, I'm so thankful that I'm not like this publican, this sinner next to me. I've done X, Y, Z. Right?
Yeah.
And so when you think that, when you're busy trying to have a good life in this world, and you don't define that as experiencing God's peace, His love, His joy, all that kind of stuff, you can get way off into how you interpret the law. Because your whole perspective of looking at the law is that that law is going to give me a good life in this world. And that good life you're thinking is a life where you have what the world calls good. Right? But Jesus had a good life. He had the best life of anyone who ever lived in this world, and He was nailed to a tree. Right? Because He had an incorruptible peace and love and joy and kindness and meekness and patience, and nothing could take that from Him. That's actually what a good life is. Right? But if your mindset is looking at the law differently like that, you won't even hear. Because you're looking at it from a completely different perspective. Right? I mean, I got a lot of Jewish friends, and some of them don't believe Jesus is the Messiah. Some of them do, and they're into like what's called like the Hebrew roots kind of thing. Messianic Jews. Yeah. They're busy. They're still busy with all the rituals because they think that it's about having. They think the law is talking about how you're going to have a good life in this earth.
Right.
So you're not going to eat this, and you're going to eat that, so you can have a good life. Well, I mean, the world also says that, don't they?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, you don't need the law to tell you that. You have the world that will tell you. I mean, how many different ways have we all been inundated with how we're supposed to eat in the last year? I mean, just be honest. Seriously.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Now, some of us can help. Some of them can help us temporarily. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, Phil, if you have Jewish friends, you yet want to understand the way they're busy looking at the law.
Right.
They're thinking of, how is this going to help my job? How is this going to help my relationships in this world? That's what they're busy thinking. And by doing this, I'm going to have that. Right? They're not looking at the spirit of it. They don't see it's the spirit. My Jewish friend, when I preach those messages on Deuteronomy, and I love this guy. Right? We go back and forth, and I love our conversations. Yeah. And, we were talking one day, and as we were talking about God, he kept pointing up, and I kept looking in my heart. And he noticed that. And he said, I don't know what you're saying. I don't really believe it. He said, but I do notice that every time I talk about God, I look up and point up, and you keep pointing down and looking down in your heart. And what we were busy talking about was the difference between the spirit and the letter in Deuteronomy. Yeah. That the phylacteries that you would put on your head and wrap around your arm was actually pointing to the Spirit of God dwelling in a person. Right? Yeah. And so we were debating that. And so there's many different reasons, but it all boils down to looking for life in the world instead of seeing you possess an incorruptible life in Christ. Anything that you could be sidetracked from, tempted with, distracted, is going to find its roots somewhere in there. Right? And listen, even now, when I really say what I think about the resurrection, it can be upsetting for people because they don't want to hear that. They want me to tell them about how they're going to have everything they want in this world. Yeah. And they don't want to hear about that's not what the gospel is. And that's not to disparage them. I didn't want to hear it at one point either. Right. And some people won't like this, but it's just a fact. I can honestly say that I don't even find myself thinking about what I have in this world anymore. And I used to be consumed with it. I used to be consumed with it. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. My dreams, my hope, my life, my world. I used to be consumed with it. And I honestly can say I don't even think about it anymore. I don't even care. I don't care. I don't care what I have. Because I see what I have. If you see what I'm saying. Right. It's like I've been persuaded that Jesus is enough. I've been persuaded that if I have Jesus, I have everything already. And the world is all the time trying to tell you what you don't have.
That's right.
And how you lack it. And how you're going to get it. That's what the devil said to Eve. No. He told her about what she lacked. And how she was being held out on. Yeah. But God had already finished everything. That's why he rested. God did everything that was needed for Adam and Eve to have life in God-likeness. And he gave it to them and offered it to them as a gift. They didn't lack anything.
No.
But they believed it. And so it's man, I'm telling you, it's a powerful thing. I was crucified with Christ. I was crucified with Christ. I'm dead to the kind of life that is subject to the decay and the corruption that's in this earth. What happens in this earth can't steal from me. It can't take from me. It can't exalt me, neither can it abase me.
Right.
Right? When you start living like that, and you start seeing the only thing that can exalt you is God, and you see he willingly come and exalted you, and you see that there's nothing that can abase you from the exaltation that God gives, you start looking at things in their proper perspective. Now listen, if I go out there and smash my car and get hurt, I'm not going to be happy that that happened.
No.
But I'm also not going to think that it can steal from me.
Right.
And as I'm sitting there feeling unhappy about what happened, I'll begin talking to my Father in heaven about how I feel. And I'll find myself pouring myself out to him about this sorrow that's come to my house. And I guarantee you about halfway through what's going to happen is my heart's going to start rehearsing about what he's done to conquer this thing that's come against me.
Right.
And I'm going to start thinking about how my life can't be corrupted by this car wreck. And I'm going to start thinking about how nothing can take life from me. And I'm going to find myself feeling happy again in the hospital room, ministering to the nurses, playing cards, playing craps, playing whatever, man, singing songs, whatever you want to call it. Do you see that dynamic?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was crucified with Christ. It says he's dead to sin, never to be able to die again. Then Paul says something profound. Likewise, consider yourself also to be dead to sin. What we've done is we haven't really connected sin and death as closely as they should be. So when he says, likewise, consider yourself dead to sin, he's saying, likewise, consider yourself dead to death.
Right.
Consider yourself dead to the death that's in the world. When you look at that death that's in the world, when you look at the tribulation that comes to your house, when you look at the corruption around you, no longer see yourself as joined to that, but see yourself as having been divorced from that.
Right.
And now being joined to eternal life in God.
Married to another.
Right. And you start walking like you're joined to that. Right? You're not joined to the death that's in this world.
No.
You're not one with the world.
Right.
You've been crucified with Christ. The world is not your father.
Right.
The world has an inheritance. And those that claim the world as their father will get the inheritance the world can give. And that inheritance is death and tribulation and corruption.
Yeah.
But you're crucified with Christ to the world, and the world to you. You've been born anew from the Father of lights in heaven. So your inheritance doesn't come from this world.
Right.
Amen.
But we've still been taught there's a good inheritance in this world.
Right.
And we can use the gospel to get it. This inheritance we can get from the world, man, it's death.
Yeah.
Like, listen, I got to do this wedding in Oklahoma.
Oh, man.
And I got to lose a bunch of weight so I can fit into my suit. I got these 3 suits. They're freaking awesome, man. I bought these suits when I worked at a finance company, and I had a lot of money because I didn't have no kids and I have no responsibilities. But I had a lot of money because they paid me well. So listen, I break out these suits, and I'm all thinking, which one am I going to wear? They're so nice. And then I noticed that one of the suits, man, as nice as it is, it's been eaten up by moths.
Oh, no.
Seriously.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
And so I'm looking at that suit having been eaten up by moths, and that's the one I was going to wear, I was thinking. And so I think, oh, I got extra material. I'll take it to the tailor in New Orleans. They got this great tailor in New Orleans. I get in there. The guy's like, oh, man. He's all, I could fix it. He's all, but you'll notice. And so, you see, that suit's nice. The world gave me that suit.
Right.
But that suit, as nice as it was, as nice as it looked, I was like Schmeagol. Precious? Precious? And so that suit was like my precious. And as nice as it was, and as shiny as it looked, and as good as I concluded that it was, and as much as everybody would have looked on me in that suit and thought, wow, look at Greg, that suit is corruptible.
Yeah.
It can be corrupted. It can be eaten by moths. And what gets us sidetracked is we identify with a life that isn't our life. We identify with an inheritance that isn't our inheritance because we're in this world and we forget that our life is not born from this world.
Right.
And so then, when the life that's in this world smacks us or screams in our faces, we can become sidetracked and we want to fix it.
Yeah.
And then we'll have plenty of people around us that'll ask us, well, have you been tithing? Have you been praying every morning? When you wake up, do you first open your word? You see how they're looking for all the things that you could have been doing right to fix it all. Listen, Jesus was as spiritually mature as a person could ever be, and he found himself nailed to a tree. Do you think it's because he wasn't reading his Bible in the morning? Do you think it's because he wasn't praying enough? Was it because he didn't give enough of himself? Was it because he missed his ministry? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's why the message of you've been crucified with Christ is a very, very powerful thing that becomes a distant thought in people's hearts and people's minds. More than likely, like what you say, they were never really taught it for
Right.
what it really actually means.
Yeah.
Right? The way Paul talked about it when he said, I was crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. He's not talking about how, well, now I'm going to go love when I didn't love before. What he's saying is the life that I have is no longer the life I could give myself with my own ability.
Mm-hmm.
The life I have now is the life that's seated at God's right hand in Jesus. Whoa! Right?
I was taught that Jesus died on the cross for all the bad things that I did.